Why, hello, Age of Nations fans. I'm series creator and producer Daniel Quick, and I'm joined by one of the co-executive producers,
DarkCloud.
When it comes to voicing myself characters, I found Marsh to be the hardest on the throat.
And you voiced him the most.
And I voiced him the most, but I found him most enjoyable because his character is so polar opposite to my own that there would just be no other way that I would act or talk that way in RL, otherwise known as real life, which is why I really liked that character. I mean, he was a bad boy without being a villain, really. He was very rough around the edges. Whereas Achilles was my own voice, but I just produced it in post-production.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. So did you prefer voicing the villains or the heroes? I don't know if you actually voiced any heroes off the top of my head.
Yeah, other than Marsh and Achilles, other than the occasional character like Parango, Sage.
Personally, I really enjoyed voicing Tycoon. I didn't really see too much of a difference between voicing the heroes and the villains. Then again, outside of Terwakaman, I didn't really have any villains, because I had Calden, who was sort of a hick I was trying to voice him as, and Jason, which I tried to do close to my real voice, as you may or may not realize here. I tried a lot of things with Jason and Calden, but those two were probably the best voices that I could settle on for them, but Tycoon was a lot of fun to voice. Terwakaman in this last episode really came into his own. There wasn't much of him in the earlier episodes, and I think I really got sort of the backstabber thing down. I probably should have taken a few more takes on my voice, just to get the sense in more about him. Being sort of sniveling, sort of trying to gain... Well, I mean, he got to be the Pharaoh. I really couldn't say a difference between the heroes or the villains. Just anyone who was a unique character like Tycoon or Terwakaman was a lot of fun.
Sage. Been kind of like this. I really don't like talking like that, but I was trying to modify my voice, whereas I said Achilles was just modified in post-production. I just spoke normally, and then I just reduced my voice about 15 or 20 decibels. I can't recall exactly. And then Marsh, why don't you shut your damn mouth? I mean, that's, you know.
Yeah, Marsh was an amusing one. I liked his voice. There were some people whose voices were so-so, but Marsh, that was definitely suited for him.
That was definitely my favorite character to voice.
Oh, I could tell it. I could tell it. Seeing every episode, you could just tell it.
When I would be reading the lines, I got into the scenes more with Marsh than anybody. I mean, the lines are in black and white, and in the scripts we might say, for example, just looking at the featurette here, like Parango, nervous, Ninicher, impatient, Heracles determined, Odysseus suspicious. I mean, all the voice actors did what they could, some more successful than others, than bringing that in. But since Marsh liked to yell, I generally like to record his lines when other people are out of the house because they absolutely hated listening to that voice.
Yeah, I mean, yelling is really difficult to do, at least for myself. I was really surprised that you could pull it off believably and well, because that was one of the things that gave me so much trouble on some of my lines.
It didn't come across that way.
Well, I had to do a lot of takes. I didn't send you them all. You may have thought I sent you them all when I sent you 4 or 5 of the same line, but no, sometimes there were 10.
Noit. I don't think I've ever said that word before in my life that I can recall. I don't know where that came from.
Probably the same place as those made-up curses. Like Muta. I think that was your favorite one?
No, that wasn't my favorite one, actually. My favorite one was one of the early ones, was this Yorick. Actually, interesting thing behind that, I wrote that swear word, but I really was actually kind of like what you see is what you get pronunciation, like Jorick. But the first person to actually voice that was Gramphos. Victor Griff, he was the first one, and that's how he pronounced it when he read it. And I went, that sounds so much better. I'm going to go with that. I made sure that after that, if that swear word was ever used by someone, that it was pronounced that way, myself included.
Oh, so last for Yorick.
Yeah, my favorite one's Yorick. Muta, I think this was the first earlier episode where I came up with a swear word that was not supposedly Greek in the series, but Egyptian. And Ninicher, I think he told, can't remember if it was Terwakomen or Leader. I think it was Terwakomen that if you're going to swear, at least swear in our language. But of course, it really isn't any language. It's totally made up. And that was to, I will admit, a little bit so that we can say we don't actually swear in the show.
Yeah.
But we do. It's the emphasis. I mean, if you actually use those words, I think in real life people would just think you're crazy. Probably think you were crazy more than they were offended. But we always made sure that when I put those in there, I would italicize those in the script. And the tone would be like, okay, this is supposed to be the F word, but we're saying it this way.
I think that was a good decision, even though every time I was reading the scripts, I always wanted to laugh when I saw those. They came off better when they were actually said in the movie, but just reading the scripts, they were hilarious.
That's right. You know when someone's really being serious, but you just want to laugh in their face because, like, whatever, like, what is that? Did Dan not spell check this? What's going on here? Like, what's that supposed to be? Names. Marsh was the first name I ever came up with. It was originally Marshmallow, and then for practical purposes I abbreviated it Marsh because it just became, you've wanted to really annoy Marsh. Actually, you could call him a Tamshing Yorick-loving Lopek to mention some more serious swears, and he would be annoyed. But if you called him Marshmallow, that was the biggest insult ever. And Marsh is such a serious person and an aggressive person, but with a name that sounds like he's the exact opposite, like a total pushover. Who would think someone named Marshmallow would be a dick? Really. And some of the names I gave actually had reason for it. For example, Virtue, with the exception of the E on the end, I mean, Virtue really had virtues that some of the others lacked. Achilles, I mean, that came from Achilles' heel. Some of them just came from Greek mythology, like Jason and Heracles and Perseus. Other ones I made up. My goal for Perseus was to be a weenie, and I think a weenie and kind of whiny, whereas I always viewed the Jason character as someone who was very young and trying his hardest, but really trying too hard in a lot of cases. Perseus is also a very young person, but very egotistical. With regards to Tycoon, he was actually one of my favorite characters to write for. He was definitely going to be back in the third featurette because we hadn't seen him in a long time. He's ambassador to Britain, but he hadn't been seen since like episode 108.
Yeah, when he left on the sea voyage, was talking with the lieutenant, right?
Yeah, and Marsh saying, like, you know, you could power the wind yourself, the ship yourself, you're so full of hot air, which is so true. And he's like, well, I never, which is so very much Tycoon.
Oh, I loved when Tycoon met Lookout.
I don't remember.
I only vaguely remember it, so maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I seem to remember it was pretty amusing. I think it was around 105. He met Intrepid and Lookout. They were coming, and he was, like, overseeing the city, and they were trying to report. He was like, what are these people?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, he completely did not realize what was going on, and they were trying to report, and he was in his own world. Yeah, that is one different thing. Because when I was writing the pieces for Jason, at least, and, like, editing, I definitely wanted him to seem sort of whinier, sort of incompetent, but he was actually trying to do the best thing, even though he was sort of willing to backstab to do it.
Yes.
But he wasn't necessarily out for himself. It was more so that he could still be around, not necessarily take power. He knew he had no chance.
Yeah. When Maynard suggests that someone needs to fetch Intrepid to find out what's going on, may I suggest Councilman Perseus? And Perseus is like, such would be a task for a peasant or slave. And then Heracles, who leads the council, is just like, yeah, go to it, Perseus, do it. Perseus is the most junior councilman, and as Marsh points out, yelling at him, like, you were in diapers when this war started, so you've got a lot of nerve criticizing what we have or have not been doing. I actually really liked having Marsh come to Trigger's defense. I always envisioned a rift between Marsh and Trigger, and Virtue being kind of the glue. Like, they were, all three of them were friends, but Virtue was forever the mediator between the two, where Marsh always said too much, always pushed too much, and Trigger kept a lot of things to himself. With killing off Virtue, I mean, that wasn't really clear at the end of episode 114, and that was kind of alluded to here. I tried to make it more direct in the first scene when, after Terwakomen kills Parango. Ninjature is just like, I suppose that was for not being able to get your hands on the Greek crossbowman we captured with him, and the Greek crossbowman being Virtue. So if you'd been paying attention in the series and had recognized what type of unit he was, then you might have been able to make that connection, especially when Tarawako Men says, well, he was too old, there was little fight left in either of them.
That was originally part of the plan, though. He was going to die at the end of Series 1, I remember. Was that part of the original handbook?
Yeah, that was part of the very original draft, that Virtue wasn't going to survive. And the reason for that was because a lot of that early stuff was based on the Rise of Nations unit line, because Virtue's, I think it was like ranged attack cavalry or something like that, it comes to an end at a certain point. And so I kind of used that as a kind of an arbitrary guide. Like, we've got all of these characters, and we want to be adding more characters as they progress through the ages, try to shake things up a little bit. But if we keep adding, then we're going to have 10, 12, 15 main characters, and, you know, these episodes are long enough. So
yeah, a lot longer than we originally thought they were going to be.
I guess the only characters I haven't really talked about were the British characters. Tarleton disappearing was totally unintentional. I don't know what happened to that voice actor. I honestly don't know.
What was his name again? His login name, screen name.
Oh, John T.
Oh, yeah, he did disappear.
And it was the one case where I decided not to recast, mostly because he appeared in 3 episodes. When he did his voices for the second episode, I remember there was a little bit of delay. It was kind of like a last-minute thing for the second one, and he said, I recorded the lines for the next episode that he appears in too, since you've got the script, like I recorded them both at the same time, as kind of like, sorry about that, Dan, so now you don't have to bug me for the third one. And I really liked the voice acting that he did for that character, so Tarleton disappearing was totally unintentional, and having Hugh be promoted, I think there was just a mention that, you know, Tarleton had been killed in battle, serving his country, you know, like any good soldier. I wanted it to be mentioned that Tarleton died honorably, because I had and have a lot of respect for the voice actor. But I really liked the development of the Hugh character. We even had a little thing about Hugh's character that Tarleton and Hugh's sister had a little fling, and that hadn't gone over well. I was going to expand on that in a second or third season. But you know who the biggest quote-unquote player in the series was? That was Tarawako Man.
Yeah.
I mean, he was...
I noticed that there.
You notice, I mean, he was with Maven. He was also with Weni, an Egyptian who we saw in one episode but wasn't referred to, and then in this featurette, Ninjature apologizing, like, I had no idea that the child was yours, because she obviously ordered her death. And it was always in the back of my mind that Ninjature wanted to be with Tarawako Men, but Tarawako Men wasn't interested.
Well, it's probably because his actual character actor was so well designed.
Yeah. Is my character supposed to say that name? Well, good, because he probably doesn't even know that character exists.
Yeah, that worked out well, yeah. I mean, just like mortally offended that I just made up that name.
Yeah, I totally forgot that.
I was just like, well, there's not much we can do now, I'm sorry.
I think that's something we also improved on in the first season, was getting the timing, because we'd always said 15 to 20 minutes, but it took us a while in writing the scripts, and we didn't even realize till after Stan filmed it, got up to even almost 30 minutes for one. And it was actually at that point that Stan said to me, Dan, you got to cut these down, because, you know, this is longer than, you know, a sitcom on television. Then this is machinima, and I thought, yeah, you know, the attention span, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, it's longer than Red vs. Blue.
I mean, there's lots of things that appeal about Red versus Blue, but I think one of them are they're nice, short, digestible chunks. They were 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 minutes at the outset in some cases, and something that we could have done. Of course, you look back in hindsight, you think, well, maybe this series would have been more popular then. We could have written these episodes with the intention of the whole episode being, say, 20 minutes. Now I'm going to use, well, let's say even 30 minutes. But release them like in 3 parts, and have like each as a serial, constituting one episode. So you make it, but then you could release one a week.
Yeah.
And then the next week have part 2. And so that way you also weren't waiting a month between episodes. Probably another thing I think probably would have been better to do is if we'd given ourselves more of a bank at the beginning of episodes before we actually released the series. Like once we released it, we had 2. We had 2 done when the series was announced. I think the second one was pretty well done when we released the first one. But if we'd had 3 or 4, it wouldn't have been quite so tight because there were times where, the release date we've got in mind is coming up and the episode is done, production and everything, 36 hours before. And we commit to episode dates. Like I would say, like on the Age of Nations website, this is when the next episode is going to be released.
And they came out on time.
I wanted to stick to that because I see that a lot, not just online, but especially that I think when it comes to some things, people commit to a date. And I realize there's real life stuff, but I didn't want to get into that habit of it being delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. You know, hindsight 2020, but I definitely didn't want the episodes to try to tell the story we wanted to tell shorter, but perhaps if we had taken a different approach in releasing it, maybe the end result would have been different, maybe not.
Like I maybe designed them like The Simpsons, for example, which has basically 3 storyline peaks.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a learning process.
Exactly right. And I'd thought about that actually about halfway through the first season. I just thought it would have been worse to all of a sudden halfway through just say, okay, we're going to change how we're releasing the episodes now. And then the numbering and then the pacing would be different. And then I was thinking, oh, well, maybe in a second season we could say, okay, this was the first season and it's contained and that's what we did in the first season. And now in the second season we're going to approach that differently. But as we know, circumstances didn't work out that way. That's the wonders of post-production.
Yes, awesome. Well, I have all those notes that I sent you, which are sort of general. When I rewatched it yesterday, I had some notes at certain times. I think that I have more notes on the beginning part than, like, the second half. So on the second half, I think we'll go into the general things.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
The interaction between what I call the 2 duos. We've commented on the interaction between Lookout and Intrepid, which I always love to come back to. I mean, that was the first scene in the first episode. But the characters have grown, especially Lookout. I mean, Lookout was the butt end of jokes. But now I don't even know what came into my mind to suddenly make Lookout a very strong political figure. Being a member of the military, which he and Intrepid weren't until the first episode. The council made Lookout and Intrepid military officers. And then the whole thing about, military officers can't run for council, as Perseus points out in this featurette. And I don't know what came into my mind to make him a political figure, but, when he moved away from Athens and he had the family, I mean, we've heard more about Lookout's family than anybody else's family.
I wrote that in first at the beginning, I think.
Yeah, I think you had with him having the definitely moving away and having. I think I might have had the kids in there, but I really didn't know what to do with them. But then you thought about having them broken shards of glass in Athens and moving away.
That inner city Athens, yeah.
And thinking
it was actually part of a really cheap joke. You took it somewhere else with it.
Yeah.
I was really just writing that because I thought it'd be a hilarious joke, and then you managed to work it into the main storyline there. Yeah, Lookout was really, I think, the most humorous character in the series. I don't know. I had more fun writing his lines, but his lines were really difficult to write because we didn't want to make it too ridiculous or too offensive.
Yeah, he was really Jar Jar Binks at the start, and that was too much. We scaled that back. Tired of writing his lines being quite that way, and it was just... Oh.
Yeah, it was good that we scaled it back.
And I think it was in one of the later episodes we actually found out that Odysseus has a daughter. That had been the first time that we'd ever talked about family in some time. I mean, we had the Luther and Maven and Marsh connection in there, and then Calden and Marsh being cousins. So I think the Lookout and Intrepid dynamic was very good. I wish we'd had more time to expand on it, and I'd actually written in a couple of scenes, but they were in such early drafts, and then I realized, this is too long. We don't have time for that. I just have to have some character mention Lookout and Intrepid.
You can see the progress of Lookout from sort of young, sort of incompetent joke to getting to be respected and everything, and then you can see where his son is in a completely different world, like living in a completely different time, which would have worked really great considering that Season 2 was supposed to be resetting it in the mercantile age? Or what age was the second season originally supposed to be? I seem to remember galleons and caravels were supposed to be around or something like that. Third season was definitely supposed to be modern days. I remember that because you were upgrading the 2C units to destroyers and battleships.
Oh yeah, I love the name of those. Oh, what did we name those boats? Floats and coasts.
Yeah.
The joke being that, my goodness, we built our first boat and it floats. Amazing. And then the second one is, hey, we can actually get it to coast too. Okay, ancient age divisions, ancient episodes 101 to 107, which we did. Classical 108 to 113, which we did. Medieval, just episode 114. And then, this year, featurette 1, gunpowder and enlightenment in featurette 1. So I think that was going to be season 2. And then the third season, and the third featurette being industrial, modern, and information.
Okay, that's roughly what I was thinking.
And again, it was very much the age divisions that determined, in some cases, the saying goodbye to some characters and the introduction of some others. I think Terwako Men had the most progression of really any of the Egyptian characters. Yeah, he becomes pharaoh, but before that, he had essentially left the Egyptian army and become a member of the Roman military, because they're in the first featurette, when they're questioning Nineveh, Terwako Men comes in, but he's in Roman blue, no longer in Egyptian yellow.
Yeah, well, considering that Hatshepsut didn't really make it that far, and they were the only two Egyptians for the longest time.
Yeah. Leader was always intended to be fodder. He was never going to make it past the first season.
That sounds horrible. I was sort of surprised that, Jason was getting killed off.
I had actually decided to kill off Jason before I decided to kill off Luther and Maven. And really that was for plot devices for Calden more than anything.
Well, Luther and Maven weren't really going anywhere as characters anyway, so I didn't feel so bad about that.
But I also liked the Zachary and Abraham interaction. I don't know what you thought of that, but I thought that evolved quite well. I wasn't really sure where that was even going to go from the beginning.
Was there some deviation from the final script to the real one? I'm just looking it over, and it seems like there was some different thing.
It has been so long. I actually watched the featurette yesterday in anticipation of this to remind myself. If you had to look back on all of the episodes, and also including the featurette, what would be your favorite? Sometimes I remember, I liked it when blah. What episode did that happen in again? They all run together.
Yeah, I can't say I remember. I know that the later ones were a lot better produced and everything, so I'm going to say just discounting the first few out of hand. Even though the writing may have been good, and some of the voice acting good, just the whole quality of the episodes got a lot better after, I'd say, about the fourth or the fifth. I think the seventh, for some reason, just remembers in my head the seventh for some reason. And I don't remember what the seventh was, but it just comes to mind.
Episode 107 was Wonder of the World. It was the halfway point right before the break, and I remember it was the one where they had British slaves and the Greek slaves helping build the pyramid in Thebes. I think that was the one when Intrepid was recounting to council what had happened. Intrepid started to tell the story and then collapsed, and then someone had to continue the story. Because Intrepid came back with Luther and Maven, and everyone thought Luther and Maven had died. And I think it was a flashback episode, 107.
Okay, yeah, I seem to vaguely remember that. Well, I'm going to say this right now. I apologize, because I don't remember which one was my favorite, but I definitely like the one where Tycoon was out to go abroad with some of his interactions with the British. I think that this featurette pretty well produced. A little bit fast, but of course...
Yeah.
We know why.
The whole second season condensed into 20 minutes. I think my favorite Tycoon was when he was captured by the Germans, by Zachary and Abraham, and he was correcting someone's pronunciation of something.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was pronounced, "No, my good man. Oh, my good man. You know, you remind me of someone else I know," referring to Marshall, not being able to pronounce things properly. And I just thought that was so Tycoon. I mean, here he is in such deep crap, although he might realize that, and he's just trying to compensate.
I don't know if he really realizes it.
No, I suppose.
I mean, he was in a world of his own. I mean, that was how I was writing him when I was editing what you had.
My favorite episode was episode 106, Adventures Far Away, which was the first one where we actually saw the sea, and we went across to Britain where we got introduced to Tarleton and Hugh and the interaction between those three, and we also had, that was also the first episode we had our first professional voice actor. There was just the kind of banter back and forth about who was the good cop and the bad cop between the British phalanxes. I really liked that one.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. I think that might be my favorite, actually.
And it was also partially my favorite because you mentioned, as of episode 104, really liking them after 104 around there. Episode 104, I remember, was the first one where I had music in the episode other than the theme song, like actually in the story, in the background, rather than just the voices. And episode 106, I just remember that was the first episode I felt I was really comfortable with the music. Keep hearing the music that I had playing when they were traveling across the sea. I'm admitting partially I'm biased. Part of it's the storyline, but part of it was also the quality production. But yeah, when we got not just the music, but definitely with Stan with doing the green screening stuff, my goodness sakes, that just, wow. Even got to the point where he would take still screenshots from the game and have that in the background as well. So that when you had one shot in game and then the next shot was one of the close-ups of the actors, it looked like, hey, you know what? That guy's standing more or less where he would be. Like, there's that kind of continuity, which was really great.
Very well done.
Age of Nations, as you said, was definitely a learning experience, and I wanted to have really deep, meaningful stories that were arcs. I mean, it was episodic, but it wasn't like, you know, in the last episode, so-and-so punched so-and-so in the face, and they were really mad at each other, and then in the next episode, it's like, where'd the Shiner go? How much time has passed? Why aren't they upset with that person? It was like hitting the reset button. And we all got better as we went farther along, from the writing, the voice acting, to the production. I'll always be sad that the show didn't get the following, at least the vocal following, because we had download numbers to show that it was reasonably popular, but no one really communicated that didn't translate into discussions in the forums or a lot of interaction with fans of the series. Like when we got people to voice act, it was like a community within itself.
Really weird.
Yeah, I don't play computer games. I'm just voice acting. Like the guy in the UK that ended up voicing Hugh, which was I think one of the best voice actors we ever had and was the most popular voice act in that poll there.
The one of which 6 people voted.
Yeah, which was like 6 people voted, but half of them voted for Hugh.
True.
I'm just trying to get into the voice acting industry, and I did like a Google search. Those guys found it because of the postings I had for the voice acting positions, as opposed to actually finding it for a show to watch, or the fact that, hey, I play Rise of Nations, I might enjoy this show.
There must be a lot of voice actors.
First one is I'm trying to break into the voice industry, and I figured this would look good on my CV. Maybe one day it will be kind of rediscovered by somebody, you know, like a television show that was on and people just kind of went, and then it gets on reruns, and then you go, whatever happened to that show? And it was, well, it got canceled because ratings were horrible. And it's like, oh, well, shoot, why didn't we realize that 3-4 years ago?
Well, I think it definitely could be, at least to some degree, because no one else did anything like this for any other game of this type of game.
My name is Daniel Rodriguez. I am the voice actor for Hugh and Spice.
Thank you very much again for having me.
Thank you once again.
It's nice to know that someone cares about the series as much as you, though. And obviously, if you didn't, then, you know, who would? But,
which is either an insult or a very nice compliment.
It's the latter, obviously. Clearly.
I know it just struck me funny as soon as you said it. It's like,
Yeah. No, after you started wondering about whether it was or not, I thought, oh, hang on, that could be taken the wrong way.